Hey guys, I'm really excited to share this video with you right here, right now. We've actually got 4 of the top meetup organizers throughout the state of Colorado, all together at one place at one time to be a panel to do Q&A so that you can learn the best strategies to run your own meetup group. So without further ado, here's the 4 top meetup organizers in the entire state of Colorado doing Q&A for you.
Different groups actually. So he'll tell you about, I think he's a member of 4. Is that right? 4?
5 with CBA.
Okay, 5 different groups. Then we've got Wendy Renee, who has 9 different groups, and then Anson Young from the Badass Real Estate Investors. We'll give them a little opportunity to introduce themselves. Go ahead and turn that mic on till it goes green, and then we will get you guys started. So I'm going to start off with a few questions that I have already got queued up that I thought might be helpful for you guys who are learning to get into your own meetup group, or if you have your own meetup group and it's just not giving you a whole bunch of traction yet, you're going to learn the right stuff today. So really, really excited to have these guys. Give them a round of applause. All right, question number 1 is, why did you start your meetup group? And I'd like all 4 of you to answer that question. Katie?
I started, I've got 2 groups. One is
Even closer.
One is for real estate investment. The other one has to do with helping people set goals and do their action plans and visions, etc. I started it 6 years ago. It was one of those deals where I happened to be on a webinar. And it was with a guy named Ross Hamilton with Connected Investors. He was looking for people to, it was an online investment group where people buy and sell, through the group. And he was looking for somebody, or folks, to do it around the country where it was face-to-face groups and he would connect it with the group. We had 25 of us, and then we, over time, said, Ross, we're not liking what we're seeing on the site. And we stopped the groups, connected formally with him, though we still stay connected with him now. And there's just a few of us that continue. My why for that quickly is that I realized after coming out of public health and education that I thought I'm going to leave that world behind. And I found that there are certain things that you just love, and you carry it into whatever profession you do. And for me, my major why is that I love bringing people together for collaboration. I did a lot of community collaboration, community engagement kinds of work before. And so that's the focus of my group, is networking, having people connect with each other, and then also this goals and action planning and helping people realize their dreams. So that was my why.
Vern Harris?
So my group is Denver ALR, which is Denver Assisted Living Residents. And I started my group, initially I was in a class with 100 other students learning about assisted living. And as I look around this room, I realized, we don't really have a place to connect. So why don't I just start a Facebook page? That's how it started. After the Facebook page was up and going for a few months, a lot of people on there said, we want to meet in person. So we started up the group Denver ALR. That's how I started. The reason why I started was I was just starting out as a broker, and I realized that there was an opportunity there, and if I was in the middle of it, the opportunities could present themselves. So that was my why.
Wendy Renee?
So my first group?
Yeah, why did you start? And if you have 2 different answers, that's fine too.
Okay, so honestly, I was in finance for I've been in finance for about 17 years, and about 5 years ago I got into residential lending. Before that I was a financial analyst, and I was just in numbers and I could be buried by myself for a very long time, weeks on end with numbers. So when I moved over to residential lending, I knew that I had to get out there and meet people. So I absolutely hated it. I hated the first time I ever went. I had to drag myself out to these groups, and it was terrible, but I kept doing it, and then I started meeting all these incredible people. And then I would go home and be like, I can't imagine, what if I wouldn't have gone? I wouldn't know that person now. And over the past 5 years, I've met people who have changed my life. and for the better, many of them through MeetUp. And then I started loving it. So I took over a group. My first group, I took over a group for a realtor who was leaving the state. And then, so I took that over, and then I just started building on that, and I added groups, and people were like, you have a problem, you need to stop with your MeetUp. But I just actually, I have 9 now, and I had 10, and I was like, nope, 9's my finish point. So I love it, and now I do it because it's changed me, it's made me a better person, and you meet just the most fantastic people.
Anson Young?
So I run a group called Badass Real Estate Investors, and we've been doing it for, I think, since 2011. And it's really born out of, there's a company called Bigger Pockets in the real estate world, and they're all about just kind of a free flow of information and non-guru type stuff. And so they had a convention where, their only convention so far, but they had a convention where there was probably about 50 just incredible investors from all around the nation sitting at the Hyatt bar downtown. And after all the events had been going on, and we were just hanging out, we're having drinks, and we're just talking about our businesses. And it was something that I haven't found here in Denver, where we can just kind of hang out and we can have a free flow of information. Like, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. This is how I'm marketing. This is how I'm getting deals. This is who I use for insurance. This is blah, blah, blah. And so I basically looked at Josh Dorkin, who's the founder of Bigger Pockets, and I said, why don't we do this all the time here in Denver? And he's like, I don't have time. If you want to do it, just go do it. And so it probably took me about a month before I just threw it up on the site, and sure enough, we kind of got a slow roll starting, and that's basically what we do. We get together, we hang out, and there wasn't like a big overarching why of, I just wanted to do more of that. I just wanted to have a casual environment where real estate investors can come and talk, meet, and network and get connected to the right people. So,
Perfect. All right, so how do you get a meetup started? Who wants to answer that? How do you get a meetup started?
I mean, I can speak for me in that I basically just put it out there. I just said, hey, I'm just going to throw it out there. This is when we're meeting. This is the time. This is what we're going to be doing. And that was basically it. And whether one person showed up or 100, there was actually about 6. So it's in between there. It was just to get it out there and get the word out there. And then it started rolling from there. But it was just as simple as that of like, hey, like-minded people, let's get together. And that's how we did that.
Was it difficult to kind of go on to meetup.com and get this started to pay for it? Was it overwhelming, or what did you find when you guys did it? Anybody who wants to take it?
Well, the meetup site itself is not overwhelming. It's when you're planning it and then you're getting ready to go and you don't know if anybody's going to come, and it's terrifying and scary, and sometimes people don't. Sometimes there's one person, sometimes there's 3 people, and then you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and 3 people becomes 6 people, and you have to, there's definitely a process you go through when you start a meetup, though, that you have to keep going, because you don't start with 60 people. Adam is an anomaly here. he just started and has huge groups, but usually it takes it can take years to build. So it's just not to be discouraged and to just keep doing it.
Just on that topic, I have that fear every single Thursday at 12 o'clock. I'm sitting here and there's 10 and I'm like, is anyone going to come? So yeah, no, that's a fear. Does that go away for you guys? It doesn't go away for me. It's every single time. So how many people came to your very, very first meetup group? All 4 of you.
I probably had 15, maybe to 20, something like that.
Wow, that's huge.
I had 6. It was in a coffee shop in Louisville.
My first group I took over for a realtor, so it was already large. So I had people there, but then after I started my own groups from the beginning, and I have absolutely sat there with one person and apologized to them that no one's there. And it's just, then you just try to keep them warmed up so that they come back.
And we had 6 show up to our first, and then we've grown from there. It was fun, even with 6. It was great.
Do any of you guys? So you started with 6, Anson.
Yeah.
How many? What's the most you've ever had at one of your events?
I think on average we were like 70 to 100 people a month, and then we have one special event every year where we meet in February, and we kind of piggyback off of a conference that's in town, and we get about 200 to 220 at that one. So.
I want to just point something out that's really not on the card, but it goes right along with what you two on the end were saying. You both had 6 at your first meeting, and I had the exact same amount, 6 at the first meeting. You know, most people who start a meetup group, they get it started, and they might see 6 or 10 RSVPs, and they might say, well, that's not enough, I'm just not going to do it. Can one of you, Katie, could you speak to what might have happened if you would have just given up before that first day?
Well, and I think that the wave can come back the other way too, because it certainly has for me. And you know, I think it goes back to your passion. It goes back to your why. I was so into it that, you know, all it took were those 6 people, and that energy from everybody saying, "Yeah, I want to do this. I want to know how to do this." And so we all kind of went out and did and that's what I encourage people to do, is sort of empower the people who are there to say, okay, now you take some responsibility in this group. Go out and find a resource on this. You know, it's almost give people some assignments, you know, when you're starting small. And then they have ownership in the group. And then I immediately formed an advisory group probably 3 months into it. So that even though I had a small group, I still had an advisory board, so that it wasn't all me making decisions. It was, let's get input from other people. But, you know, for instance, in my group, what I found is that my group, I've kind of gotten away from speakers, and we're more about facilitating networking at every meeting. And that only speaks to certain people. And so we actually used to have 40 to 60 people at a meeting, and now we probably have 25. Because that's the people you define that this is what I know I want to come for. I'm not coming for a speaker, I'm coming because I want these relationships that I'm building. So, you know, I think it really, again, it depends, but it's that passion that you got to stick with, you know, from my perspective.
I'll expand on that. I would agree that the same thing is when you do hit, you do a meetup and there's over 100 people there. It's very, very exciting. And you also need a team around you though, because I do regular events in Boulder with 100 people plus for 2 hours, happy hour during the week in the summers, every month. And I cannot get to everybody to say hello. So you need like other people helping you manage or doing things or meeting people and working the room. So I would say the passion, it gets you there and you just keep doing it. Because like I said, I caught a meetup bug, and now I just love it. But it's really exciting when you see 100 people in a room that you've invited.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the team. I kind of that'll be our next question. We'll get right into more of like who has a team and who's doing it by themselves. If you're doing it by yourselves, how are you doing it? And how did you assemble a team? Before that, I just want to mention to everybody, it's not necessarily better to be bigger. So being big, having a large group is great, and hopefully you're touching a lot of other people's lives, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's better for you. I remember when this group was more like 10 or so people, every single week we were doing a lot of deals together. We were able to build really, really strong relationships. So I wouldn't focus just on the size of your meeting, because like Wendy was just saying, when she has 100 people there, she can't really connect with everybody. It's almost impossible. And I have the same thing when I'm bringing my team. My team sometimes doesn't know why they're coming, but it's because like maybe somebody wants to talk to Blue Spruce, and I say if I have 5 or 6 of my other Blue Spruce people, not everybody's going to be able to talk to me, but somebody will be able to talk there. There is a growing pain with having more people, you're doing less business with some people sometimes. So I wouldn't focus on getting it to 100 or breaking 10, because sometimes you have a lot of value by being smaller. So let's talk about your guys' teams. At least one person, if you could just talk about the team that you've assembled to make your meetups happen. So, because it is a lot of work if you're by yourself. And any of you that has never had the team, raise your hand. Okay, I was curious because I was going to ask you how the heck do you do it. But yeah, let's talk about your team. So one or two people, kind of how did you assemble your team, and how does it help your group?
Well, I have a co-organizer on my team, so it's one other person, and her primary responsibility is the back end stuff. We recently started charging, so she does all the collections and the bookkeeping and that type of thing. And she was there from the start, so that's how I got her.
So I was on both sides of the coin. I ran it by myself for, I think, 4 years. And my group is pretty relaxed and pretty casual. So it's pretty easy just to throw up a post, show up, have some drinks, talk to some people, go home, and there wasn't a ton of organization. There became a point where I got so busy that I couldn't even show up to my own meetup. And so I got somebody who I trusted and who was coming to my meetup, a girl, Mickey McNee, who showed up, and she was the face of the meetup, and she would answer questions and kind of facilitate things as needed. Then she ended up moving overseas, and then so I brought in a guy named Dan Mackin, who's actually supposed to be here in my place, but he's out of town. So Dan handles a lot of stuff, including venue type stuff, and then I handle the rest, which isn't a whole lot, honestly. So I don't have a weekly meetup where I have to book a place like this and I have to do a bunch of crazy stuff. We didn't even get up on meetup.com until last year because we didn't need it. And now we have people who show up who are like, "What's Bigger Pockets?" And we're like, "Okay, we're reaching like a new audience," so which is good. So, but I couldn't do it without Dan. So
yeah. With that said, you kind of touched on the process of getting there, setting up. There's a lot going through your head. There's people that want to talk to you while you're trying to sign other people in or whatever. Can you guys kind of go through the process and how you handle that with your team?
You need this. 'Cause I've been in this.
It's okay. I had a partner that was at the very first meetup, and he ended up taking a job where he's on the road all the time. So I'm kind of back to myself as the primary organizer, and then I have this advisory team. And my advisory committee kick in, and they show up early and help me set up the screen and the speaker system and the PowerPoint and help with the check-in. And it's very informal. I mean, no one's paid. We don't charge a lot per year. It mainly covers the costs of the meetup site and other site-related expenses and a couple parties, I believe in parties, just to have things be informal. So it's there are times when I am doing it by myself because no one else is available, and I'd much prefer the times when sometimes like what Bert's saying. People come in the room, and if my advisory committee isn't there, I say, "Hey, can you help me set this up?" And so, again, I think the more you can actually engage the members of your group, the more ownership there is. And so I find people who sometimes will come early just to help, even though they're not on the committee, they don't see themselves as a formal position. So really, the entire group is part of the group.
Get there early. That's my advice.
I would say another piece is to, as you grow and you meet the people in MeetUp, you meet other organizers. And so it can be very good to partner with other meetups and have them together. And then you have people who are used to doing all of that and they come early. And then that creates the team, is that you're working with other meetup organizers. That's very, very helpful.
That's huge. I've done that too with a couple of people around, and that will change your guys' lives if you're getting into doing a meetup. If you can put yourself right next to other leaders who are already leaders, and it helps position you. And definitely you bring your network to them and they bring their network to you, and you both grow, and you kind of pass a little bit of the responsibilities to each other on that event. That would help you grow your meetup a lot faster. Anson, did you have something that you wanted to say?
This is about setup, right? Setup?
Yeah, the process of getting it set up and checking people in or whatever.
Right, yeah. So again, we're so casual that we have a sign that I just bring with me. Usually, kind of speaking back to that core group of like when we were small, we've kind of continued this small, maybe 10 people who show up every time, no matter what, whether they're doing deals or they're not, or they're and they've kind of become this core group, and so we actually meet up informally for dinner beforehand, and then basically, 6 o'clock rolls around, we throw up our sign. We don't have check-in or anything, so it's like we throw up the sign, and they actually facilitate a little bit where they've been there for so long that they're going up to new people and they're talking to them. They're kind of bringing them in and making them feel comfortable on this informal level. Like, I've never sat these people down and said, "Hey, can you help me bring in new people, make them feel comfortable and welcome?" They just do it because they have kind of an ownership piece of the group since they've been there for so long. So
you bring up a good point. I have a question for all 4 of you. I suspect that, yes, please. Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Just something that I found helpful. When I created the advisory group, we actually get together once a year, sometimes twice a year, to create a vision and our goals and our action plan for accomplishing those goals. Because I think that sometimes it's easy to not think of this as a business, but that for me has really helped me stay on track, because sometimes it's really easy to go, oh, I can, squirrels, just like we do with real estate, is that, it's easy to get off track sometimes. So I find that creating a vision, setting your goals, getting the action plan, figuring out how you're going to accomplish that, it has really helped me personally, I think, as well as the group. But anyway, that's just another thought. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, it's good. So let's move on now. I was going to ask you what happens if nobody shows up, and we kind of covered that before, that we all have that concern every time, but what would happen if there was only 2 or 3 people? How would you handle that?
We've had snowy days. In February we had a really snowy night, and about 7 people showed up. It was back to the original day. And we just said, okay, shift, and we shifted the room around, and we pulled some tables together like a big kitchen table. And we just said, okay, what would be helpful tonight? And we went around and just did a check-in with everybody about where they were and what resources could you use and how do you help each other, and we just brainstormed. So I think you just have to be flexible enough to go, okay, if this happens, what's everybody need? And throwing it back to the group again and saying, what would you guys like to do? I mean, we're here, let's take advantage of this. Even if it's 2 people, you can still take advantage of that.
I think it's absolutely important to engage those 2 people as the best people in the room, and maybe that's the only 2 people, first of all, that matter in the scope of things, but importantly, to not that everybody matters, but I just mean don't look at it and be like, oh, there's only 2 people, and then you don't engage with them. They're there to engage with you, and so that's what you need to do, is you need to carry on as though that it's fine. And in fact, like going back to the large groups too, is sometimes when I have smaller groups, I really enjoy it because I do connect with everyone versus just kind of lightly tapping around. So I think that can be, you can embrace it as your small group and your large groups, and you just embrace every meeting and every experience because you don't know who you're going to meet.
All right, next question is, what would you say as advice to somebody in this room who wants to start a meetup, but they're naturally more bashful or introverted? What would be your best advice for them to get their meetup off the ground?
That's a great question. I think that because I know other meetup organizers in the real estate world, and not everybody's outgoing and introverted, but they see the benefit, and if their why is big, of like, whether it's a monetization why, like, hey, I want to build this and I'm going to sell coaching on the back end or whatever that looks like, or if it's like, hey, I really love helping people and I really want to empower people in that direction. If their why is big enough, then it kind of gets over a lot of those personality quirks of like, hey, I don't feel like showing up tonight, but I know that there's people who are going to be there, whether it's 2 people or 200, and I have to look back to why I'm doing this, and then have that push me through. Because there's definitely days where it's an off night and I have other things going on, but I make it a priority and I look back of why I'm doing this, and that pushes me through at least. Because there's definitely nights where I don't feel extroverted, and I would rather just like, hey, I'm just going to go grab a beer at the bar and just be by myself. But I also have this obligation of like, hey, even if one person shows up, that's enough. I could talk real estate all day. So even if it's one person or 100, I still have that obligation and that power of why I'm doing it.
Does anybody else have an answer for that, or should we move to the next?
I would just say, if getting in front of people is not your strength, but your intention of the group is your strength, then to find a partner who really likes to be in front of other people. And you just find out. I mean, I remember somebody told me once, and this has really led me in this group process, is find out what you don't do well and don't do it. Because I always try to really make myself do these things that I hated doing, and that might be the thing you really hate to do. So it may be that you just find the right partner who is the face of the group, and then you do some of the other things of the group. So just a thought.
I'll add to that. There's nights when I get a little choked up, trip over my words and feel bashful, but really just be yourself. That's the easiest way to do it. Just be yourself.
And just keep doing it, because the more you do it, like you do anything, as I mentioned, when I first went to my first meetup, I absolutely had to push myself out the door. I was so afraid to just meet anyone, and just all the fear. And most people have that. So you got to remember that most people have that, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you are. So your weakness starts to become a strength.
Do any of you guys have some advice on how to market your groups, how to market the events in particular, what you do to bring people in?
Well, I think MeetUp.com does a lot of that work for you, at least in my world. And before that, again, we were just doing Bigger Pockets posts before they even had like an event section. It was just like, I don't even know where we posted it first. It was just like, hey, if anybody wants to get together, we're getting together. And then just kept consistently posting and responding to people inside of that. So that interaction piece of like, hey, Mir, it's good to see you at the group, or Denise who comes too, and some other people who also in this room come to our group to come and hang out and do our thing. And that follow-up piece, but I mean, Meetup does a lot of that stuff for you, and I'm sure that maybe people have better ideas of how to. I mean, it's not our goal to be the biggest group in town. We just want quality people to show up and interact. And so far, we're good there, so we haven't had to go externally advertise, but maybe these guys have.
So I use Meetup, do an announcement, then I'll copy that text and put it on Facebook, and then I'll copy that text and blast it out to my email list, and then I'll do that again in a week or two, and then I'll do that again in a week or two, and then I'll do it again 2 days before the event, because I want to be top of mind. So it's all about marketing and consistency and repeating it without being too annoying. You don't want to do it every day, but once a week doesn't bother too much.
I've seen with you, Vern, and you go right after, is that you've also actually made cards. You've paid for cards and brought in a big speaker from out of town on your topic of assisted living. And you've promoted that in other people's groups, like my group and maybe even the John Fisher Breakfast Club. passing these out. And I remember the tickets were a cost, but it added a ton of credibility to you to have that person flying in, and then everybody had this card with them that they didn't really want to throw away either. So I've seen that as another marketing thing you've done as well. Katie?
I think the only thing I'd add is I do the same thing where I do a meetup, then there's a button on there that says announce. And after you've created your text, then you just hit announce. It goes out to your group. You can also email your meetup group. There's an opportunity as an organizer. It's got organizers tools on there. You just click on the tools and you write an email if you want to add a little extra information, or maybe your information is, hey, when you come, be sure to bring business cards and a friend and plan to eat something. I mean, things like that. And then I do the same thing where I'll put something on we've got a Facebook page, and put it on our LinkedIn page. And then you can also use MailChimp. And so you can create a list of your membership, and then that's an email that you use really well. I don't know if you use MailChimp, but one of those kinds.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of snazzy up your announcement a little bit more within the email. So there's a bunch of ways to do it without necessarily having to have a website.
She said something that she passed over and may not have even noticed that she said it, but it's very psychological, and I wanted to point it out. She said, when you come, bring your cards. So what that's doing to the person who sees it is it makes them feel like they're there with cards. It's putting them there, and so they're more likely to go. So I wanted to point that out. Instead of saying, you should come, just say, hey, when you come, bring plenty of cards. There's going to be a lot of people to network with, and now you're seeing yourself handing other people cards. So it's a big deal, and I would do the same type of language when you're posting in your groups as well. The next question is how you get people back. So we're talking about how you got them there in the first place, but we want to talk about retention and how do you get somebody to kind of be a fan and continue to like your group a lot.
I'll just say real quickly again, getting them involved in some way, shape, or form so that they have an identity. Even if it's that, hey, would you help when you're at other groups, will you represent Inc. and tell other people about Inc.? I mean, just getting people engaged.
We try to provide some education, good content, so that they want to come next time and get some more education and good content.
I would say it's about keeping just integrity within your group and keeping to that why, and making sure that and you find out what other people are doing there. Really engage and ask a lot of questions. Why are they there? And if you can support them in your group and how you might do that, as well as just keeping it so you're just being real there with them and not pushing them to do something. You know, you're not pushing them to do. You're just real in the moment and becoming friends.
We just try to up the ante every month. It's like carnival performers and then acrobats. Honestly, that's a great question. It's something that I never thought about until you answered. It's like a KPI that I've never tracked of like, why do people come back? I think interaction, getting them connected to the right people. So I try to facilitate networking as best as possible, but in a group of 100 people, I think Adam came to my group probably for 6 months before I even got to talk to him, because he was on that side of the room and I'm on this side of the room, and then I would try to filter that direction and he was probably filtering in the other direction. And so it happens all the time but the people who I do talk to, I try to say, hey, what are you looking for? Like, oh, I'm trying to do houses in Aurora, and I know that Near or somebody does houses in Aurora, and I say, hey, go talk to him because he knows what, or if they do multifamily, I go, hey, go talk to Bill S. He knows, he's the man on that. So I try to facilitate that so that they come back for if they need more facilitation, if they need more something, show up and we can point you in the right direction. So
I was hoping one of you would actually bring that up, and I've noticed that the most probably with you and with Dan is that I see somebody walk into the Badass Real Estate Investors group, and they'll come in and they'll maybe talk to Anson or Dan, and they'll say, I'm going to get into fix and flips, or I'm doing this whatever strategy. the first thing that ever happens is one of these two always says, you need to talk to blah, blah, blah. And just think about that for yourself for a moment, and the type of quality that is for Anson or one of these guys up here, to when you walk in, that they're not just trying to steal your business or make you feel like they're doing a sales pitch. You can tell that there's a lot of integrity and helpfulness that is coming from his heart to put you in touch with the right people. And when he continues to be the connector, both people are benefiting, and both people are telling other people how much value they got from being there that day. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And then the next question that I had for you guys is, how much do you guys charge for your meetup group? Is it free? Is there a charge? Why is there a charge? How do you cover the cost if it's free?
Ours is free, and our meetup space, we've always tried to get that meetup space for free so that we could pass on that freeness to our members. And that's been a little bit of a challenge, especially as the group grows and grows and grows. We went from a really cool bicycle bar in kind of 17th area by the hospitals there, who was just like, hey, we have Monday nights and we don't have, it's not very busy. So we'd love to have, 40 people come in and spend money. And then when we totally outgrew that space, it was getting very awkwardly cramped. We found that Blue Moon down in Rhino has the same thing. Monday's a slow night. They give us about half of their entire restaurant, and they don't charge us anything. So it works out perfect.
All my groups are free. I don't, as a mortgage lender, I face a lot of compliance, and so I don't accept money for anything ever. And so I everything's free, and I just consider it as part of my, like I was telling these guys earlier, that it's kind of my social life. It's become, so sometimes I spend money on the rooms, sometimes I get, arrange free places, etc. But they're all free.
We started off free, and after a while expenses started to build up, so we started charging. It's a nominal fee. It's $10 for one or 15 for two, or they can have a yearly membership of 60 or 90. I'm with another group that charges $20 for one and $30 for two, and they charge, I think, $180 and $200 for a year.
Yeah, Vern and I are about the same on that. We started out as free probably the first 3 to 4 years. And then we chose to do a website. And so the hosting on the website is about $175 a year. Meetup is about, $160 or so a year now. Then, you start to buy equipment, and we have a couple of parties a year. So after a while, it did get to be a bit of an expense. So we charge $60 annually or $80 for partners. And the partners can be 2 people who are members of the group. It doesn't have to be a business.
Unless you're Wendy, and then it's $90 a month. Because once you pass 3 groups, it's $10 per group every month. So it can get an expense. I know we pay quarterly. I think it's like $150 for 5 groups. Anybody else have anything to add before we move to the next question? Perfect. All right. So, how do you feel about sales pitches in your group, whether it's from you or from one of the members? And then also on a follow-up question, and you don't have to answer them both. But do you personally have anything to sell or to offer to your members?
That's been sort of and that's really my personal commitment thing, is we've never had sponsors. We very purposely said there will be no sponsors. And so we actually have a table when people come in, they put out their cards, they can share their flyers, they can openly share their properties. And in fact, if they have another business, we have somebody who's a dog sitter, we encourage them to even talk about because we have other streams of income. So we've kept our prices relatively low, but we had to charge something because sponsors bring money, but they also bring an obligation to have to feature those sponsors, and other people feel a little more intimidated about sharing something that might be in competition. So I don't have anything else that is like another program or an educational program or an investment or whatever. And mine is purely bringing people together to connect with each other. So
I do have a service that I offer that is brokering the assisted livings, and I do allow vendors to come in, but the key is they must provide information, educational information. It's not, we don't allow sales pitches, it has to be educational. And if their product will help our group, then great, but it's not a sales pitch, we don't allow that.
I do have a product for real estate, for mortgages. However, I always show up completely authentically, and I'm honestly there to meet you. And what I do is sometimes I give away free stuff. So I give away swag, and if you want to connect with me later for my service, that's great, but that's not, like, that does not come up the first thing. That's not it. So I just give away free stuff. Add to this, as you grow your groups, what can happen is people will reach out to you if you have a larger group, and they want you to advertise to everyone. And that happens quite a bit, and it's another part of kind of like the integrity of your group, is that if somebody comes to me and they want to promote a fundraiser or something like that, and you buy tickets, sure, something that adds value to the population or to an animal or environment or whatever. But then I'll get people who will email me and say, hey, I have a new photography business. Will you blast it and offer 10% off? No, absolutely not. I don't even entertain it. I don't even write you back. So you have to, so it's just part of that showing up authentically again, and not sales pitching and hurting the group.
What are some, did you have an answer to that?
No, we don't. We don't have anything to sell. So.
Okay. What are some useful tools that you use to help your meetup group? Katie earlier said MailChimp. What else do you guys use to help you?
yeah, I actually jotted mine down because I was afraid I'd forget them, but pretty much the same things. So MeetUp is, I was just going to go another way, but so many people come into your group through Meetups because they're just looking for the topic and then they join your group. So Meetup to me has been great. LinkedIn, Facebook, I think we have about 3,000 people on our Facebook page now, but you have to kind of get on there and monitor that somebody's not selling tennis shoes. I use Google Docs a lot. I use that to share, for instance, our goal setting and action plan with our advisory committee members. So if you've got people who you want to share things with, Google Docs is really helpful. PowerPoint, to put presentations on. I use SiteGround as my web hoster because they just have such outstanding technical support. So they've been great. And then I use WordPress if I'm doing, and then MailChimp. And then I use SurveyMonkey. So occasionally, just to make sure that we are kind of staying in tune with what people want, I might send out a quick SurveyMonkey, which is free, just to 3 questions to make sure we're getting people's needs met.
If one other person has something quick, then we'll move on.
All of those plus microphone, speaker, projector, those basic tools, signs.
Awesome. Okay. And I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to try to remember that, and I probably would have forgotten about all the equipment that you need to have with you, and sometimes even a camcorder to help promote your group on Facebook or on YouTube as well, which is what we do. Next question is, how do you think about and what do you wear when you go there? What do you wear when you go to your group? Are you dressing up, dressing down on purpose, and why?
I just go like I go every day. Business casual is what I typically wear. Most of my clients are that way, so you want to dress to the people that you're attracting.
Agreed. Same thing.
Anybody else? Cool. We'll go to the next one. Is where do you hold your meetings? So I hold mine here. Anson, you go to a bar that's slow on that day. How about the other 3? Where do you guys hold your meetings?
So sometimes I hold them in restaurants like this if they're going to offer a free space. Sometimes I do host at venues for the higher end. If I bring in speakers or if I'm doing like a class, something like that, I will rent out a nicer venue in the space and make sure that I have it, as well as provide food sometimes, etc. So it just depends on what the topic is.
That's always a challenge. We had found some restaurants that had the space, but you had to guarantee a certain amount of purchases, and if you didn't make those purchases, you had to make up the difference. So one of our meetings, it's one I co-organized, we had to come up with $200 at the end of the meeting because they had a $500 minimum, and it was one of those rainy, snowy nights. But we hold ours right now at a place called Venue Food and Wine Bar. It's at 2817 East 3rd Avenue in Cherry Creek. The owner of that is a fellow investor, and the food is terrific there. They give us the whole space. They still have people come in, but they're in the back, so we get the whole front space, and it works really well for us.
We hold ours at Mud Rocks. Terrible name. I don't know. The food's okay. Yeah, it's a sports bar in Louisville, and they've got a community room like this where it's separate, and they let us use the room in exchange for people buying their dinners. And then I hold just a July party and a December party at my house. So
I drove past Mud Rocks 3 times, and I kept asking people where Murdoch's was. I'm a little bit dyslexic. I was like, does anyone know where Murdoch's is?
I should put that on there. It's either Murdoch's or Murdoch's, however you read it.
All right, the next one's a really interesting one. I think we'll get a lot of learning from this because there's 2 ways to come into a group. One way is you just start a group, and it starts with 0 members. You're the first, and you wait and wait and wait, and it might feel like a slow climb. The other way to get into a group has been alluded to as well, is when somebody else is giving up a group or one of the groups that you're in, they just kind of let it go. So if you guys could speak a little bit to how you got your groups and which one was more effective than the other.
I had a very targeted audience, so for me it was pretty easy. They wanted to meet, and I've got a pretty wide network, so just advertising to everybody that I knew what we were doing. If they're interested in the space, they show up.
I have done both. I have acquired groups and started groups, and I think they're both completely beneficial. It sounds like better to acquire a group, but that can actually backfire on you a little bit. Sometimes you have a group and they're used to the old person style, the previous person style, and the people who are coming, and maybe you get a different group, and it can actually be kind of nerve-wracking because they're not used to you. So there's pros and cons to both, and I would encourage both.
We started from 0, and we kind of we've been approached about buying other groups, and it'd be kind of hard to walk into a group of, 20 or 30 or 50 or however many people and be like, hey, this is how we're going to do it now. It's my way now. So I've never entertained it, but we have gotten offshoots now where somebody wants to start a group up in Erie. So we have an Erie group, and we have a Fort Collins group, and we're looking into maybe a Colorado Springs group that just kind of go under the brand that we have and just kind of follow the same format that we do.
I've got an answer to that as well. So in the audience, please raise your hand if you came here from BIG, Boulder Investor Group. Okay, so I took over a group, BIG, and I promoted this same event, and nobody's here, but they already had 300 people that were members. Raise your hand if you're in Colorado Alternative Investors. 1 person. So that's another group that I took over that had 190 people, and I advertised the same thing in that group, and it did bring 1 person. Raise your hand if you came from Investors Network of Colorado, if the only reason you're here today is because it was advertised there. Raise your hand about Creative Real Estate Lunch Club of Metro Denver. Creative Real Estate Lunch, of all of the groups that I mentioned, there's even more that were advertising it, but the only one that you're really seeing is the one that was started organically from scratch and started with 0, because you kind of build those followers slowly. Anson had a really good point. I believe that, and for some reason I believe this, and I hate to say it because in case I ever want to sell this group, right? But what I really feel is that if I had anybody else take over this group, people just wouldn't know them. They wouldn't know who that person is, and they would be less inclined to go to that group. So it might be kind of swimming upstream, but there's a huge pro that Wendy kind of mentioned, and that's if you take over a group, and anytime I have an option to take over someone else's group, I will. And what I do, and write this down, is I utilize the mail feature, and because I have 300 or 200 or 600, how many people were in the last one that you took over in investors, technology, and real estate?
800.
So you have an opportunity to go into a group that has 800 people, and you can use that mail list, and if you can kind of slowly bring them toward you, and actually that group has some really awesome things happening. So there's pros, like she said, and cons as well. So the next question that I have is, yeah.
Can we ask?
Not yet. If you can hold it, I'll be passing the microphone. I want you guys to ask questions, and as soon as we get through the card, I'll be handing out the microphone. Number 17. Okay. Do you guys use a sign-in sheet?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Why do you use a sign? If you use it, what's the purpose for it?
Build a list so that we can continue to market to them.
Once you do charge, you've got to, I have a list that just is a checkoff list for a person who's at the registration and check to see, who came and if their membership's expired. It's kind of a pain. I mean, it's a consideration. And
I have an example today. There's a lot of people that dodge the sign-in sheet. They don't want to take the time, and today was a good example even, and not to put anybody feeling awkward about it. But there's probably at least 5 people that prefer to pass the sign-in sheet, even though I kind of put it right here. So if you're doing this, I like the fact that you can retarget them. But just so you know, a good percentage of the people that walk in, and you know who you are, I'm one of them, I'll be honest, don't want to sign in. They prefer not to. They don't want their information being taken. So that goes to these other 2 that don't do sign-in sheets. Why don't you do a sign-in sheet?
I'm a firm believer in passing cards if you connect with someone. I personally, I'm one of the ones who dodge the sheet too. I will do it if I know you, like I did it for Adam today. If I didn't know him, I probably would have walked by it. And it's just because it goes back to being authentic and creating a relationship and a bond. And if you want to give me your card, or if you want to take mine and we can meet up later, that's great, but I'm not going to force that upon you. So I do not do any sign-in sheets.
Anson?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I think if you found us and you didn't find us through our normal channels, which BiggerPockets and MeetUp.com, I mean, I don't know where you found. Maybe you stumbled into Blue Moon one day and you just joined our group, and that's great. But if I took down all the list, I'd be just one more email on top of what they already get from us, and so I guess it just never made sense on that front. So.
Thank you all for sharing all the different opinions on that. And think about that if you guys are going to plan to do a sign-in sheet or not. Some of you won't do it because you don't like signing in, and some of you will because you're just huge marketers. And it's 2 ways of thinking, but definitely I agree. Some people are totally okay with signing in, and some definitely don't want to. The last question that I have before we go to audience questions is how you use your mail list. If you're doing sign-in sheets, how are you using your mail list?
Well, we had a situation with the state changing the regulations on the assisted living recently. So I was able to reach out to everybody that we had on our list and rally the troops, so to speak, so that we could fight the regulations that were unreasonable.
One of the things, even though we don't do like a sales thing, one of the things that we do support all of our members with is that if anybody does any sort of education, training, services, whatever, that we do like to support our membership. So I add, after I've gotten the sign-in sheet, I'll add that to our MailChimp list. And if there is a training, then I can say, hey, you know, one of our members is doing a training on whatever it happens to be. We don't get any portion of the cost of that training. It's just one way we can support our members. So that's one way I use the list, is if there is a training available, or you know, as Vern said, if there's something that's just really important piece of news. And then I use the list as another outreach to let people know about the upcoming meeting, in addition to MeetUp. Because I've had people say, well, I didn't get any announcement from MeetUp, and that's because MeetUp sometimes will go into somebody's junk folder or spam folder, whereas MailChimp, the email is more likely to reach them. So.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. When we're doing it, our mail, we'll mail one day, we'll mail from the email list, and that's about 1,000 people that'll get that. And then on a different day, we'll mail just the people that have come before and signed into the sheet, and that's only about 200 people that are on that smaller list. So, and we also treat them slightly differently. We'll treat the one mail kind of like a cold mail, just like it's friendly, you don't necessarily know them, and we'll treat the other one kind of like their family, that they've been here, they've met you, and so you think slightly differently on your avatar, the human being that you're talking to. We attempt to connect to them slightly different based on which mail that we're using.
One more thing, I think there's a bit of a middle ground there too. Like I host a lot of CE classes for realtors. So if you're there, first of all, they're going to take your name because they need to provide it to Dora. But if you're there and you want to be on a list for future classes, that's different, you know, then you want to be on that list and you want to be notified of the classes. So there's kind of a middle ground.
All right, so audience questions, and we'll start right here with Brenda's question.
My question is, I did acquire a MeetUp, and it wasn't really active in the beginning as well. So, and I do get onesie twosies, but what do you suggest to, besides email, I guess? Is that really the only way to liven that up?
I would say yes, if that's the only way you have to communicate with them. Probably need to have a good why they should go.
So the marketing, how you're wording the emails, is that what you're saying? Am I getting it wrong?
Yes. What's your target? What was the meetup about that you took over? Are they going to be interested in what you're wanting to show them?
All right, audience questions? I'll pass the mic.
Can I just add something real quickly to that, Brenda? One time when I was just pretty low on the number of people who were showing up, that was when I sent out a Survey Monkey and said, hey, I could really use your help on something. I'd like to get your input on what you need. And maybe just one or two questions. And again, it's a way to get people engaged and then ownership of the group. Because people like to see their ideas reflected in what you do. So it's one thing you could do is a quick Survey Monkey.
So I can do Survey Monkey through MeetUp?
No, you would sign up for it. It's just surveymonkey.com, and then you link your mail addresses to the Survey Monkey, and then you send it out to the email addresses. Or you can create a link to the survey through Survey Monkey. And then if you don't, say, have their personal email addresses, which you often don't with MeetUp, you can use the organizer tool and email the members, everybody who's on that site, and in the email, give them a SurveyMonkey link. So,
Great idea, thank you.
First off, thank you so much. This has been great. One tool that I would actually really suggest that I use is Slack or some relative other chat channel. I've had a lot of success in building ownership in a group and getting collaboration offline. So I think Slack, Discord, Telegram, all these things, something to look into for other organizers. But my question is, I think most pressingly, I'd like to know about when you transitioned from a free group to a paid group, how did that change the kind of people in the community that was there, or was it the same?
I was really worried when we did that. And the first time I attempted it, we had an attorney coming to speak, and nobody signed up. And I was freaking out, thinking, oh my God, either they don't want to talk to an attorney for $10, or they're really mad at me. So I sent out an email and said, okay, it's free. And then I talked to the group and asked them, what do you guys think of this? We've got expenses. And I might have put them on the spot when I asked if anybody wouldn't pay. But the next time we charged, actually, we took the opportunity when we changed venues, and that's when we charged, and nobody batted an eye at that point.
I used my advisory committee at the meetings because we needed to start covering the expenses that we were putting out. And then they were the advocates at the meeting to say to the, we had a discussion then with the larger group. And the advisory committee said, this is our group. That means all of us in here. And we just broke down what the costs were and said, what do you think about charging, and then people gave input on what they thought was fair. It was just total buy-in, so.
It's not hard to put a couple $1,000s a year into a group.
Easily. Yourself.
So my question, you guys have kind of covered, but it goes to Adam as well. How do you keep the content relevant, especially when you're doing a meetup every single week? And I know you bring a lot of speakers in. Do they get paid, or they just do it out of kindness of their heart to grow their network?
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay, so yeah, we have 4 weekly groups. One in Boulder, one in Northern Colorado, one in Castle Rock, and one in Denver. And then I run Denver Apartment Network with a couple partners, Self-Directed Investors Network, and Colorado Brokers Association. That is so hard to do, to keep it relevant, to keep speakers, and to keep it organized. It is, if you're doing that much, it's difficult. We host about 20 meetups every month, between 4 and 6 meetups a week. How I do it is I spend one time and I think about topics that I believe are relevant, and I have somebody else with me to brainstorm, and we maybe will write 100 topics, and then we'll retweak those 100 topics to have a more inviting title. And then we will think about the highest experts that we know in the country or the world, the highest experts we know for that topic. And we start by reaching out to people out of state. And we slowly, if we can get somebody who adds a ton of credibility, who's a podcaster that everybody here knows, or whatever, we'll start with them, try to bring them in. The other people that are important is to bring people like this in, because these 4 have huge meetups themselves. They've been, some of them running them for not 7 years, 6 years. Some of these folks have been in front of people for a long time, so it's hugely beneficial to me. If you can see why I bring them in, it adds credibility to our group, and it's cross collaboration. So first, put a whole bunch of topics. Then I reword the topics, then I pick speakers for the topics, then I reach out to them, and once I get that, I can do 52 different events. I can schedule them all before we ever get to 2018. I had the whole year scheduled out, including this was scheduled last year. And I knew what we were going to be doing. The relevant topics happened from brainstorming, and then the speakers happened from just trying to get the most credible people in front of you as I can. And I actually love some meetup organizers, and I think a lot of them fail, and not very many of these guys are doing it, but some meetup organizers have to be in front of you every time. If I was in front of you every single time, there was no reason for you to come to me. But if I can get other awesome people that you know to come and speak at my group, it's hugely beneficial. So that kind of answers the question, how do you guys keep your topics relevant?
Yeah.
Easy for you.
Have no content. There you go. No, and we've toyed with it. We've toyed with going like, hey, we have a casual networking group. Do we kind of split it? Do we have, like, I would love to provide more content, but the way that we're structured, we kind of like charging versus not charging. I would be afraid that we would lose certain people, that I would have to actually schedule and get people in. And so we've done a hybrid where we're starting to do kind of roundtables. So if you want to go to the back and talk to a commercial lender who's not going to sell you on their services, but if you have 100 questions for this guy, he's there to be the guy. And so I think that there's different ways to do it. It just depends on what you want for your group, but that's kind of how we do it.
So I have both social groups where there's no structure, it's just fun, as well as I have speakers, and that is a very difficult part, to stay relevant and to go out and get them. There's a lot of work that happens to do that it doesn't look like when you get here. But so like for instance, the group that we were just talking about, technology for real estate, I have wanted to create such a great group that I've probably taken 20 people out to lunch in the past 2 months who will speak once a month through the end of 2018 because you have to go out and find these people and bring the relevance, and it's time, and you do have to pursue that and be persistent.
I'd say it is very difficult. In my group, it's very, very narrow. So I have to kind of scour the industry and find people that bring value to my group. And it takes a lot of phone calls and a lot of meetings, and it's a little challenging at times.
We have a little different philosophy, and I think it just comes from my background in education, is that we don't ever have outside speakers. We only have people who are members of the group are the only ones who are allowed to actually lead the discussion, because I just believe strongly that you learn best through experiential learning, from involvement. But that's just our philosophy to do that. And we actually are shifting something. We're trying something. We did used to have a topic every month.
I don't know how heavily you guys rely on that.
Not at all. It used to be that 20 people or 40 people would RSVP, and then I'd have 60 people show up. Like consistently, I always had 20 more, and it was happening every month. And now that doesn't happen. So I don't know. I haven't found it useful at all.
I think it's about 70% accurate, but what I've experienced is my numbers usually match up because the other 30% are people that didn't RSVP. So 30% won't show up and 30% will show up that weren't on the list.
I always just cut it in half. If 60 people RSVP, 30 are coming, and you don't know who those 30 are. And if there's a few extras, it's just a bonus. But they fall out.
Yeah, same thing. We've had 70 RSVP and then 90 show up. We've had 70 RSVP and 50 show up. So it's really hard to gauge that unless you're doing like a paid event. I'm sure maybe that's way more accurate. Where if they have to pay on the RSVP, which is an option, we've had one event where we've done that, and all the money went to charity for our big 200 people event, and that was pretty accurate actually. That was like 200 signed up and 200 show up. So,
me normally I see between 60 and 75 normally. That's the average. Today, for some reason, it looks like I have 100 and something percent because 42 people RSVP'd and there's a little over 40 in here. Just normally, I'd say 60 to 75 for our group. So,
I think my question is exactly to how you combat that, right? And it seems like at least one solution is charging something, even if it's pretty nominal. I've experimented with the idea of just using like a free Eventbrite ticket to maybe have more ownership. Can you guys speak to tools that you get a more accurate number?
I'm doing my first Eventbrite right now, and hopefully everybody who got a ticket will show up. And one of the tricks that I did with that is made there be a good price to the ticket, but allowed a few people to get that ticket early for free to kind of add people in there. And now we still need to pay for the venue, and it's going to be expensive. There's $3,000 of food, and there's $650 in the venue, $250 in some chairs, and some cleanup price and advertisement costs. So that one we charged, but we did let a bunch of people in for free. Raise your hand if you're going to Dan for free. Okay, and then unfortunately some people had to pay a little bit of money, but we were able to get 160 people to get free tickets right away, and now the rest will help us pay for the costs.
yeah, and I think for our one event where we've had it, that we really had to budget for people numbers, not expense numbers. It was literally the fire code for the building was, I think, 220. The year before, when we didn't charge, I think we blew that out of the water, and the people who leased that space were like, we can't do that. We need to try to stay under. So we capped it, and then we charged, and then that's how we kept our numbers, And if Blue Moon or somebody said, hey, we need to sell a certain amount of alcohol and food, and we need to know how many people are coming, that would be pretty difficult for us to do the way that we're currently structured, since it's like, hey, free for all, tell your cousin, they'll show up. Okay.
I'll just add to that real quick. Not for my groups, but actually I do a lot with DMAR, Denver Metro Area Realtors Association. And for them this year, I know that they went, so everything was free. You could sign up on Eventbrite to all the events that they had all over, and they were having a problem with people falling out big time. So what they started doing this year was they started charging $15, and that if you spend $15, you're more likely to show up or not sign up and not, and not be there at all. So I could just tell you that was their shift for DMAR this year.
That one thing. I mean, since you're in a crypto group, could you do something where you go, hey, send X amount of Litecoin to a wallet address, and then we'll give it away, or something like that to make it kind of interesting for people to go, hey, I transferred it. Here's my number, and then you could something like that.
We experiment with some of those ideas. I think that the idea of going towards like a donation only as well, like Patreon, for instance, for making your own media content. That was going to be my follow-up question. Is Have you tried to capture value out of your group through alternate means than asking for a ticket price? Do you ask for Patreon or something like that?
And at least for me, the only event that we've actually charged for, we gave away all the money, and so people were like, that the cause was really good, and so they saw that and they said, okay, it's not Anson and Dan, rolling in this $3,000 or however much it was. It actually went 100% towards this thing, and so people were like, okay, I have to pay for this one, but it all goes towards something that's worthwhile. So
So I guess here's an idea for the group. Would anybody be interested, for instance, if I had a ticket price where I say, come to our group and we'll give you crypto back at that same face value? Like, would that be a fun mechanism to try and bring people in? You pay $10, you pay $10 of Bitcoin?
I'd do that.
I'd do that.
Very fun.
Absolutely. Can I just real quickly?
Yeah.
This is just my experience. I don't know if you, but we tried for a while to go with just donations, and it just fell flat on its face. It just didn't help at all. But that was donations towards helping with the group. When we did donations towards a cause, that wasn't a problem. But people did not, they either wanted the group to be free or they wanted us to charge something, but they didn't want to give donations to make the group run. That was our experience anyway.
I had a similar experience when we were starting to charge. I thought, well, let's just ask for donations. I think I got $10.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted.
Can anyone speak to the meetup.com versus the meetuppro.com?
I've seen it, but I don't know it. Do you guys know
No.
Meetup.
I know what it is, but it doesn't, I've checked it out. I'm just not sure it's advantageous yet. I just don't fully get what the, well, and I'm not sure about I don't know.
So are you all just Meetup?
Yeah.
You too, Adam?
So I was at MeetUp HQ for some big MeetUp event, and they were pitching MeetUp Pro a lot. I still don't know all of the values that it has. Some of the things that it does is very good on keeping track of algorithms that are happening that they don't share with you otherwise. So they have, if you go to MeetUp there are 3 different stories. They're on floor 7, 8, and 9. And level 9 is a whole floor of about 40 engineers, and they're very different from levels 7 and 8. 7 and 8 are party animals. They're bubbly. They smile all the time. And then the engineers are super, super quiet. But these engineers have done a lot of really intense things inside of MeetUp, whereas they know a lot more about us than they share with us. And they're starting to divulge a little bit of that information into the MeetUp Pro, which will allow you to reconnect with people. It'll allow you to do to mail things to them, to do email to them, to be able to retarget them, to see things about them, how many people come, and they're starting to track your phone if you're showing up to the meetup. So they're being able to start to know if you've done more than just RSVP. So slowly this will be more of a tool for you. If you really, really want to grow that meetup group, I would say I still am not sold on it myself, and I run a lot of meetup groups. Although, if you run more than 3 groups, then you're more likely to benefit from it and should take a look at it. If you have 1, 2, or 3 groups, personally, I would say don't even worry about it. All right, we'll do one more question after Greg.
So I guess I have 2 questions. I've been running a non-real estate meetup group of groups, camping and otherwise, for a long time. And what I noticed was this turn to Facebook groups, and some of these, and I'm in a lot of other meetup groups, it seems like there's a trend to either have a Facebook page or not, go back to it or not, and then MeetUp went through a period that it was just harder to put things in, and they just sent out an email that claims they made it easier, and I don't know if they did. So I'm just curious if any of you also seem to have Facebook groups and a MeetUp group, and you're mixing them back and forth. I don't, but I'm just curious as that. And then my other related to this is, again, there was a time period where MeetUp was not approving groups or closing groups when they thought you were selling stuff or doing something wrong. And now I see a lot of groups that seem to clearly be nationwide and selling stuff. So has there been a shift in whatever they're doing. So that's a myriad of
That's
but
the,
Facebook meetup group question. My main.
I was just going to say that's the other benefit to Meetup Pro is it's national, so you can have a ultimate group and then a bunch of children, and you're paying a lot less. You can have a national group, so it does seem as though they're playing toward that. Yeah, it seems like they're starting to want Meetup to be used a lot more. But go ahead.
As far as our Facebook group, we just started it. I think in like December, yeah, something like that. And we're still trying to figure out what we want to do with it because we do post our stuff on there, and Adam comes in and he posts, related events for our members if they're not on his Meetup. We do let people come in and say, hey, this is real estate related in Denver. We're all about that. So on our Facebook page, yeah. And we might be gearing our Facebook page to fill in that content piece where we could provide some more value to our members without having a speaker and change our whole format and stuff like that. So we're still toying with that, but we basically, I don't know, I guess we're so new at that piece that we haven't figured it out. But we do post our meetups in there, and we just link to our meetup like I did, I think, yesterday. I just said, hey, we're having a meetup on Memorial Day. I know it's Memorial Day, but show up. So that kind of thing. So
Just a funny thing with the Facebook. We started our Facebook page, and I think we've got like 3,000 people in there. And people use it a lot. I don't think they make much of a connection, even though they have Nina's Investors Network, and I put ads on there about the meetings that are coming up. I had one guy one day go, gee, wouldn't it be a great idea if we all met face-to-face somewhere in Denver? And everybody that's on this page, and then somebody wrote back and said, I thought that's what this was. And so I think that, people almost see them, and I'm okay with the fact that people are getting a lot of value from that, and they never come to our group. There's a whole bunch of people on. But I think Facebook sort of has a life of its own, and we thought we would be making this great connection between, remind people that our meeting is tonight, and I see very little connection between what happened. I'm not sorry that we've got it because I think it's very valuable for people. They post their properties, they post anybody have a contractor. I think it's been very useful. So I think it's served its purpose, but I'm not seeing much of a link between that and our actual group that meets. I don't know if you guys do.
I've noticed a lot of people, everybody in this room obviously knows what Meetup is, but everybody in that other room likely doesn't even know what Meetup is, doesn't know that there's an opportunity there. So I feel as though it's a huge benefit to be able to touch people from both places, maybe tell them what's going on LinkedIn as a professional place, that this is something you're interested in, you should come, or on Facebook as a place where apparently it's where most people are hanging out most of the time is on Facebook. So I feel like it's a good thing to be in front of people on Facebook, and I've definitely, in my group, I've for sure seen new people come through Facebook and not through Meetup. So
But did they join Meetup? So they do that too, or do they both?
sometimes they join Meetup and sometimes they don't. But when I'm personally taking their email list, they're going on to my MailChimp list, even though they may or may not be on the other list, and they'll still be able to know what's going on. So. One more question. All right, we've got Paul.
Just a quick question on how much time you devote each week to each group.
Probably, for me, 1 to 2 hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours a month to each group.
I'm not even sure. I devote a lot. I have 9 groups. What I try to do is I'm also a member of like 3 service organizations, and I do some other committees. So sometimes what I try to do is overlap the stuff and promote in different areas because you can spend a lot of time finding your speakers and finding your rooms and calling restaurants, and you can spend your day doing it. So So I've had to kind of time manage that and start to overlap a lot of things. A lot of time.
Mine was designed so that I didn't have to do a whole lot. And I know that sounds like I'm a slacker or lazy or something, but honestly, if I had to spend, 4 hours a week on it, I probably wouldn't get done because I have a family and I run a business and everything else. So I spent an hour, or let's see, I probably spent about an hour outside the time that I spend at my meetup, which is about, we show up for dinner. So I probably spent about 5 hours that night there between dinner early and I stay till close on usually the last one who's leaving. And that's by design. There's usually friends and people who are hanging out and we're just talking. And so probably about 6 hours a month, but 5 of those I'm actually at my meetup being interactive. So
I personally spend a crazy amount of time with my team, with Chad, with Robin, promoting each event individually. Raise your hand if you came here only because they sent you a LinkedIn message and you never were a part of the meetup before that. There's at least 4 people in this room today now because a couple weeks ago we sent a few messages to people that I thought would actually be interested in something like this. And again, I was up until 3:30 this morning making sure to finalize those so that I could remember to make sure everybody had the address to be here. It's just something I do. My main idea is to add value to other people. And so the main focus is like, even if I'm going to stay up for 7 hours replying to messages when I should be asleep, I'm focused more on helping somebody get where they want. And so if somebody on my LinkedIn page felt like this would be of benefit to them, I wanted to be able to reach out to them, and not so I benefit, but so that they benefit. And I think that that's really, really important. Like the why that we started with, the very first question today, if you understand exactly where you plan to go, and my plan is to leave a legacy and help other people, if you understand exactly where you plan to go, if you want to make money or whatever, that keeps you going at 3:30 in the morning, and showing up here every single week. You have to first build the exact reason why you're doing this, and that'll motivate you to do that. If I cared more about money, or if I cared more about freedom of time, I wouldn't spend that much time and effort messaging people on different platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and meetup messaging other people in other groups as well. Private messaging people in a different group that seems like it would be relevant to what we're doing today. Like Denver Founders has 3,000 members, and they get about 150 people RSVPing. I had a feeling that a lot of them would want to do something like this. So I spent time sending maybe like 120 invites last night to Denver Founders as well, because I want to help them get to where they want to go. So anyway, the why is super, super important. We should probably wrap it up. Does anybody have parting advice?
I would like to say something on the why to finish off is to, I would say your why can change as well. Like my why is not the same as it was when I started. And so you get to a point where you feel responsible to add value. And so with my 9 groups, I have like more than 4,000 people that I can directly message or create value. So you start to spend time not on what you're doing, but how you grow that. Like right now, I spend a lot of time. I'm trying to get volunteers to teach skills to people, and like on a Saturday, come in and teach us how to do stuff. So you start to expand because my why has changed, because there are so many people you can help that will come, and they're different audiences. So you can control the time.
I think we should give everyone else also an opportunity, just a parting advice to a beginner.
My mantra has always been, if you have an interest in something and you don't see it out there, just start it, and then then you get people that you get surrounded by that then. And for me, it's real estate. So if you don't see a real estate group that speaks to your niche, like I've never been to assisted living, management, or buying or running type group, but now I know that there is one, and he didn't see one, and he started one. And for me, I didn't see what I wanted, so I started it, and it didn't start off as like, hey, I want to make a bunch of money and I want to do this, but I've surrounded myself with amazing people who are friends and partners now, and we've done countless. Not countless, there's definitely a number, but we've done plenty of real estate deals where I've bought deals, I've sold deals, I've lent money, I've given my contractor to people, same thing. And so there's been so much value there that like I couldn't imagine my life right now without having started that and then ran with it. And you might think it's too late now that there's MeetUp and there's all these different stuff, but it's like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today, because we don't have a time machine. Unless you do, and come talk to me later. So.
Parting advice is just to absolutely keep doing it, because it can be hard and it can be scary, and if you don't keep doing it, then you don't see these benefits, and you don't meet all the people that. Some of the most amazing people in my life right now I've met through MeetUp. And it gets weird, like, how do you guys know each other? Oh, through MeetUp. And it's sort of kind of like this weird thing, but I don't know, it's some kind of stigma, but I love it, and you just have to keep doing it. If one person shows up, you do it again, and you genuinely meet that one person, because they did show up.
I would say you need to be ready for a commitment, because once you start something like this, you are helping people, and you can't walk away from that.
Just to go on a couple of others. One, the Facebook page helped me, because I know early on I was putting lots of hours into it. I mean, so much of it was people calling me and going, "Hey, do you remember that guy with the blue ball cap on? I really need his name and his phone number." And I was doing this constant connecting. That's one thing I would actually suggest, having that Facebook page, is you can get into a mantra with people of saying, go to the Facebook page, say that you want this, and that's how people really connect. So that really saved me tons of time. One thing a tool thing that I kind of forgot real quickly, we first started charging, we were using, I think it's WePay that MeetUp site uses to collect money. And we got away from it because they added a fee. And so then we went to Square. And my place that I go right now doesn't have great internet connection. So then you have to invoice people. So I almost think now that I wish we would have stayed with the MeetUp payment system if you are going to charge something. Because then, they just automatically, find out from the person that they just want to renew it every year. And it took a lot of administrative hassles off, so that's just a little piece of advice that I.
All right, let's give these guys a giant round of applause.